You know, there have been more talks of reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, but at the same time, the United States is reimposing sanctions aimed at curtailing oil exports, which would generate a lot of revenue for the Islamic regime in Iran. Now, to chat about this in more detail is the foreign affairs expert and the host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, why, first of all, the push to get a nuclear deal done? Didn't President Trump, when he was president, pull the United States out of the deal altogether?
That's probably the most important question you could be asking right now with regards to U.S. foreign policy. Why would the Biden administration want to get back into a meaningless deal that will not curb Iran's nuclear program, will not curb their spending in terrorism and terror proxies in the region, and will not curb their behavior across the board? And if that is the ultimate goal, then again, why is this the policy and strategy going forward? For the past couple of years, this kind of phrase has been swirling around Washington where they say the Biden administration doesn't have an Iran policy. But many of us knew that behind the scenes, they were working back channel opportunities to get back into an Iran nuclear deal, even when they went back to the negotiating table in Vienna many times, and the Iran regime was asking for way too much. So even the Biden administration that has been so bent on getting an Iran deal could not say yes to the many, many concessions that they were asking for. Now, fast forward to where we are right now. 8 months, the Iranian people have been on the street saying regime change. That's what we want. It's a very simple message. We do not want reforms or any behavior changes under this regime. The Biden administration has stopped short of supporting regime change. They said we won't get involved in regime change, but we do support the people's movement. We do support the sanctions. But meanwhile, this is double talk. Why? Because, Hal, as you know, the Foreign Desk posted a video over the weekend showing Robert Malley, who is the Iran envoy for the United States, attended meetings with different officials on the sidelines in secret, in privacy, to discuss going forward with an Iran nuclear deal. And I'll add this last piece is that the reason why they won't call it a nuclear deal is because the Biden administration does not want this to go through Congress. They'd rather call it some sort of understanding, a memorandum, in order to circumvent going through Congress, because they know that this bill or this nuclear deal has no chance in the U.S. Congress.
Wow. Lisa, Hamas's leader who lives in Qatar is expected to meet with Iranian leadership to discuss new development in the region. Now, some say visiting Iran is a sign of improved relations between the Islamist terror group and the Islamic regime. That's not really good for us here in the West.
Right, absolutely. And this is just one of many things on the checklist that we should look for with regards to Iran's behavior. We know that they've been supporting terror groups in the region, from the Houthis in Yemen to Bashar al-Assad's insurgencies in Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon for many years, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and of course Hamas in Gaza. It's been going on for many, many years. What the regime has recently started to do, however, is expand its portfolio, right? We know that they just normalized relations with Saudi Arabia after 44 years. And of course, that was a deal that was brokered by China. Another red flag for us. The fact that Iran is opening up its network, the countries that have agreed to work with Iran's regime, we can no longer say that we're isolating them to get a certain change out of them, but they have found other partners. So that's why we see so many oil sales. Their oil sales are actually up, even though we say that there's sanctions on them. And even though the people in Iran have been on the streets for 8 months, the regime continues thumping its chest and moving forward. And of course, meeting with Hamas officials, meeting with Taliban officials, meeting with people from China and Russia, and of course, again, expanding its circle into Latin America, the African continent, and more.
Now, speaking of meetings, Lisa, political experts say the relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia are improving, thanks in large part to a recent visit to Tehran by Saudi's foreign minister, Faisal bin Farhan.
Yeah, so the doors are open and there are different meetings. So when China brokered this deal, the United States and Israel, frankly, were like, well, we're kind of blown away. We don't know this happened. And they didn't, right? Which is, again, another red flag. But the fact that China has become this main key player in the Middle East is, of course, very concerning. But the main question that people were asking is, what does this deal mean? Is it just something on paper, or will it actually mean something? Like we've seen with the Abraham Accords, with moderate Arab nations actually having real private and public dealings with Israel. Here we're seeing Saudi visit to Iran. It's not a good sign for us. It means that actually there will be some cooperation on some level, whether it's economic or strategic or both. We shall see. But the fact that there was a visit should be very concerning to the United States and should really factor into how we shape our foreign policy in the Middle East going forward.
Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas recently wrapped up a visit to China. Now he was looking for economic aid and expressing concerns over China's repressive policies towards Muslim minorities in parts of China.
Right. So a lot of hypocrisy here, right? So we see Mahmoud Abbas going over to China. Again, this network of rogue players is absolutely growing, and they don't stop at anything, right? So China would love to meet with Palestinian Authority. They'd love to meet with Iran's regime, with the Taliban. And again, of course, especially go down the list of partners that are not on such good terms with the United States and the West. So with regards to the Mahmoud Abbas, there is a lot of talk of this hypocrisy because the Uyghurs, as you know, are the Muslim minority group in China that have been persecuted. They work in sweatshops. Their children work in sweatshops. They have been raped and again, marginalized, thrown in prison, in camps. I mean, it's horrific. And they've been written up many times by different rights groups, the United Nations and others. But here we see Mahmoud Abbas going over there and really not showing the support, or not at least not having it change or shape or pivot any sort of or any part of his trip or any part of his relationship with China.
So, Lisa, how concerned should we really be here in the West with China meeting with Iran, meeting with Russia? A lot of the adversaries of the West joining forces right now to create an even bigger powerhouse around the world right now. How concerning is that?
Absolutely concerning. And it's not just there, Hal. We know that they're growing in terms of their influence inside Canada and the United States as well, inside our universities, inside our labs. I mean, they have operatives working in so many different important sectors. And the United States is only focused on whether or not they're going to invade Taiwan. Well, that's a side, it's not a side issue, it is a main issue, but that's not the only issue. Even if China were to say, we're not going to invade Taiwan today, they are still a threat to us. And that's because of their growing influence throughout the globe and throughout the United States and the West. And that's exactly what they want to do. They provide infrastructure and housing and buildings and roads in exchange for hearts and minds. They're providing technology. They're getting information. They're getting intel. They're in every single continent, and they are growing their legitimate relationships with so many different partners, as we just outlined in the last few minutes, that should be the growing concern. The fact that they do copycat technology and have the latest and greatest, the fact that their military is growing at an exponential speed, the fact that they're spreading their influence throughout the seas and throughout the region and throughout the world should be very alarming to the United States. I think they are probably the greatest or one of the greatest threats to U.S. foreign policy right now, and we don't really hear that coming from Washington.
What's alarming as well is all of the amount of hacking that we hear coming out of Russia, out of China. Beijing says a report by a U.S. security firm blaming Chinese-linked hackers for attacks on public agencies, schools, and a number of other targets around the world. They're calling it far-fetched and unprofessional, Lisa. Now, the report out of Washington has some pretty hard evidence here.
Right, of course. I mean, look, of course, they're going to deny it. And of course, Washington can provide as many reports as they want. Washington continues on it in its bureaucratic ways. Here's a report. Here's a bill. Here's some legislation. These rogue partners, I mean, these rogue adversaries, rather, they don't care. China's not shaking in their boots when we're saying, aha, you were hacking us, or you were responsible for this leak and for being non-transparent about COVID or about X, Y, and Z. Of course, they're going to deny it all. All they hope to do is waste time, increase their provocations, and keep going with their own agenda, which they've been doing very, very, very well. So, of course, hacking is part of it. We know that they have been extremely sophisticated in growing their hacking technology and growing their technology in general across the board. It's something that's extremely important to them.
You know, it appears as though some labs in China are still eligible for U.S. government funding for research on animals. Lisa, didn't we go down this road before with not a very pleasant result?
It's truly horrific that we have not learned our lesson, or certain lawmakers have not learned their lesson. Just this morning, news broke that Bill Gates just partnered up with a Chinese university for military research to the tune of 50 million or more. This is alarming. It's alarming that there is this desire to work with the Chinese when we know that they are either copying us at best, and at worst using it against us. And that is what we have seen, right? So we know that they have operatives in different places. We know that anything that we have given them, they have used against us, and they have used to better themselves across the board. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So wake up call to all the lawmakers in Washington, D.C. regarding the threat that is China and how they are marching on. And they've not been stopped, and they probably won't be stopped under this administration, but it is definitely a wake-up call to those elected officials who are supposed to protect us and to protect America.
Lisa, some news from across the pond. There are reports out of London that say Britain's parliament is introducing a bill to prevent local councils from boycotting Israeli goods, and major fines will result for those who break the law.
This is wonderful news. It's wonderful to see the UK be proactive and really a leader in defending Israel and defending Zionism and really protecting against the boycott and divestment from Israel movement that has been really a hijacked movement in the West, where they kind of piggyback on a lot of intersectionality and a lot of other social justice causes and say, well, if you care about these other causes, you also should hate Israel. And somehow this has taken flight and has spread everywhere. And you can see it all over social media, unfortunately, where it's probably the most prevalent. But the UK, I applaud them. You know, the White House, the UN, they still have trouble even defining anti-Semitism, defining, all these hate crimes that have been committed. Number one hate crimes right now in America are against Jews. And it's really an astounding statistic when you look at the small number of Jews that there are in America as compared to other minorities. No one should be hated. No one should be targeted. And when they are, the UK showing us by example what we can do to protect especially large corporations and entities from going against or following this trend of hatred against Israel.
I was chatting with one of our producers here this morning, Naveen Day, and we were chatting a bit about what Trump is going through. And Lisa, former U.S. President Donald Trump says he could face up to 400 years in prison with a recent indictment. Now, Trump faces a total of 37 counts, including 31 of willful retention of national defense information. Let me ask you, does he stand much of a chance here? What's going on?
I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but obviously whatever we are watching, and I'm not saying he's an innocent guy across the board, but I am saying that this is a political show on many levels. It's not a good look for the United States, regardless of who that president is who is being targeted. And of course, we know of Democrat presidents who have had also classified information. We know that President Biden has had classified information in his home and in his possession. So it does look like, they're thinking, well, 400 years should keep Donald Trump quiet and away from any presidential election. So I think that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping to get rid of him. But Hal, I will say, love him or hate him, ever since this trial has been on and these indictments have been announced, he has been able to raise a record number, a record amount of donation money, and his popularity has grown. So whatever they're doing is backfiring. Again, not a good look, regardless of what your political party or orientation is. This is not a good look. This is not a proper use of democracy or our justice system. It's using our justice system as a political tool to go against a political enemy. And it's very apparent. I mean, they can deal with him in different ways. And again, I'm not saying anyone is above the law, whether Democrat, Republican, or independent, but they should understand that this will have consequences for the United States and how this appears really to everyone.
So let me ask you something. Who's the number one candidate for the Republicans moving forward? You got a pretty big election coming up next year.
We do, and if you believe it, all the straw polls that I've looked at show Trump in the lead. DeSantis obviously is a popular guy in Florida. He's popular among a lot of Republicans who kind of want to step away from the drama that is Trump. But again, for those two, DeSantis and Trump, to go against each other would be very counterproductive for the Republican Party, and Joe Biden would just have to stay in his basement and win another election. So we shall see what will happen. But again, I think it's very important for lawmakers on both sides to really see how their actions are detrimental and very consequential to the United States. This is not just a blip in history. This will have consequences going down the line.
Let's see how it all unfolds. Lisa Daftari is a political reporter and host of the Foreign Desk. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.